The summer sun cast long shadows across Willowbrook Cemetery as Willa Fairchild stood motionless before a freshly covered grave, her black mourning dress billowing softly in the warm breeze. She hadn't expected to return to Rattlesnake Creek after 10 years away. Certainly not for a funeral, and absolutely not to face the man whose silhouette she now recognized approaching from behind the weathered headstones. Owen Walker removed his hat as he drew near, his once boyish features now hardened by years of riding the frontier. The lines around his eyes told stories of sun and hardship, but those eyes green as the mountain pines remained unchanged. He stepped carefully across the hallowed ground, his spurs making soft, rhythmic sounds against the dry earth. "I heard you were back," he said simply, his voice deeper than Willa remembered. "Didn't expect to see you here, though." Willa clutched her lace handkerchief tighter. "I owed it to Mrs. Patterson. She was kind to me when few others were." The year was 1885, and Rattlesnake Creek, Montana Territory, had grown from the dusty outpost Willa had fled a decade before. Now it boasted a proper general store, a schoolhouse, and even a small hotel where she had taken a room upon her arrival yesterday. 10 years is a long time, Owen said, his gaze unwavering. "Not long enough to forget some things," she replied, finally meeting his eyes. The cemetery had emptied after the service, leaving them alone among the stones and wooden crosses that marked the final resting places of those who had carved life from this untamed land. "You look well," he offered, though his voice betrayed more emotion than the simple compliment warranted. At 28, Willa had matured from the spirited girl who had once promised herself to him. Her auburn hair, now fashionably arranged beneath a modest black hat, caught copper highlights in the waning sunlight. The years in Boston had given her a composed demeanor that masked the tumult she felt standing before him. "As do you," she managed, though the sight of him in his dark coat and vest, clearly his best attire saved for solemn occasions, stirred memories she had worked diligently to bury. Owen stepped closer to the grave, reading the simple inscription on the wooden marker. "Martha Patterson, beloved teacher and friend to all. She spoke of you often," he said quietly. "Even after your letters stopped coming," Willa's throat tightened, "I stopped writing to everyone." "I noticed," Owen replied, a hint of the old hurt surfacing. A moment passed between them, heavy with unspoken words and paths not taken. "I'm sorry about your father," Willa said finally. "I heard about his passing last year." Owen nodded, his jaw tightening. "He went quick, pneumonia. Said he was just tired and then he was gone. And the ranch, still there, bigger now, got almost 200 head of cattle, built a new house too, just like I always said I would." The mention of his dreams, their dreams once hung in the air. Willa looked away, toward the mountains that framed the small town, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. "I should go," she said, though she made no move to leave. "The stage leaves for Helena tomorrow morning." Owen shifted his weight, his fingers working the brim of his hat. "So soon?" "There's nothing for me here now," his expression hardened. "There was a time that wasn't true." Willa felt the familiar ache spreading in her chest. "That was a long time ago, Owen." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the leather and sage scent that had once been as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. "Some things don't change with time, Willa. Some feelings get buried but never truly die." His words, spoken so softly they barely carried on the breeze, pierced through the careful walls she had constructed around her heart. "I can't do this," she whispered, turning away. "I made my choice." "You ran," he corrected, not unkindly. "After everything we planned, after all we promised each other, you just disappeared." The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Willa flinched as if struck. "I had my reasons. I deserved to know them." Willa closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. "Perhaps you did. But that doesn't change anything now." Owen replaced his hat, squaring his shoulders. "I'll be at the Silver Dollar tonight. If you want to talk before you leave town forever, you know where to find me." He turned and walked away, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun, leaving Willa alone with the ghosts of her past and the uncertainty of her future. The Silver Dollar Saloon had changed little in the decade since Willa had last seen it. The same worn bar stretched along one wall, the same cloudy mirror reflecting the faces of men who sought solace in whiskey and cards. She hesitated at the batwing doors, suddenly conscious of her gray traveling dress and how out of place she would appear. But something drove her forward, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a need for closure, or perhaps something deeper she wasn't ready to acknowledge. The piano player in the corner was pounding out a jaunty tune as she entered, though the music faltered momentarily as heads turned to observe her entrance. Women in a saloon were not unheard of in Rattlesnake Creek, but a woman of Willa's obvious refinement drew attention. She spotted Owen immediately, sitting alone at a corner table, a glass of amber liquid before him. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, and he stood quickly, pulling out a chair. "I didn't think you'd come," he said as she settled across from him. "Neither did I," she admitted. A server approached, and Owen ordered her a glass of sherry without asking. It was what she had always preferred, she realized with surprise. He remembered. "You said you wanted to talk," she prompted when the drink arrived. Owen studied her face in the lamplight. "I want to understand why you left the way you did. No goodbye, no explanation." "Just a note saying you were going east and not to follow." Willa sipped her sherry, buying time. "It was complicated. Try me," he challenged. "I've had 10 years to imagine every possible reason and none of them make sense." She set her glass down carefully. "My aunt in Boston wrote that she could sponsor me at a women's college. It was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. You could have told me that. We could have worked something out." "What would you have said, Owen? That I should turn it down? Stay here and become a rancher's wife at 18? His expression softened. "I would have waited or found a way to make it work." The truth of his words stung. "I couldn't ask that of you. You didn't ask. You decided for both of us." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "What really happened, Willa?" The moments stretched between them, taut with tension and old pain. "I was afraid," she finally admitted. "Afraid of disappointing you, afraid of failing, afraid of becoming trapped in a life I wasn't sure I wanted." "And now," he asked, "what do you want now?" Willa glanced around the saloon at the rough-hewn world she had left behind. "I don't know. I teach at a girls' school in Boston. I have a good life there. But you came back for Martha's funeral. She wrote to me last winter. She was ill and knew she wouldn't recover. Asked if I would come when the time came." Willa's voice caught. "I couldn't refuse her that." Owen nodded slowly, understanding. "She was special to a lot of folks around here. She believed in me when no one else did, said I had a mind that shouldn't go to waste." "I believed in you too," Owen said quietly. "Still do." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, Willa glimpsed the boy she had loved so fiercely, the one who had taught her to ride bareback across mountain meadows, who had kissed her beneath a canopy of stars, who had promised her the world. "I should go," she said suddenly, standing. "The stage leaves early." Owen stood as well. "At least let me walk you back to the hotel. Town's changed, not always for the better." The night air had cooled considerably as they stepped onto the boardwalk. Willa wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, acutely aware of Owen's presence beside her. They walked in silence for a time, their footsteps echoing in the quiet street. "Do you remember the night of the harvest dance?" Owen asked suddenly. "When we snuck away to the river?" Willa smiled despite herself. "We nearly drowned trying to cross on those stepping stones. You were fearless then," he said, glancing at her, "laughing as the water soaked your dress." "I was young and foolish. You were alive," he corrected, "more alive than anyone I'd ever known." They reached the small hotel, its windows glowing warmly against the darkness. Willa turned to face him, suddenly reluctant to end their conversation. "Thank you for walking me back." Owen studied her face in the lamplight. "Will you at least consider staying a day or two longer?" "There's something I'd like to show you before you go." Willa hesitated. "I don't think that's wise." Since when has wisdom guided either of our choices? He asked with a hint of the smile she remembered so well. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. One day. I'll delay my departure for one day. Relief washed over his features. I'll come for you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Good night, Owen, she said, turning toward the hotel entrance. Willa, he called softly, causing her to pause. I meant what I said at the cemetery. Some feelings never truly die. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her standing on the threshold between past and present. Dawn broke clear and bright over the eastern mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. Willa had slept poorly, her dreams filled with fragments of memory Owen's laugh, the touch of his hand, the promises they had made beneath a Montana sky. She dressed carefully in a practical riding skirt and jacket, suspecting that Owen's plans would involve horses. At precisely 9, she heard a wagon approaching outside her window and looked down to see him pulling up in front of the hotel, handling the team of chestnuts with the easy confidence she remembered. Morning, he called up to her, grinning when he spotted her at the window. Thought we might need the wagon today. Downstairs, he helped her up to the seat, his hands strong and sure at her waist. You look right at home in those riding clothes. Some habits are hard to break, she admitted. I still ride in the park when I can. Not quite the same as racing across open country, I'd imagine. No, she said softly. Nothing quite like that. Owen clicked to the horses and they moved forward, heading out of town toward the rolling hills beyond. The morning was crisp, the air scented with sage and pine, so different from the city Willa had grown accustomed to. Where are we going? She asked as the town receded behind them. Thought you might want to see how things have changed, he replied, keeping his eyes on the road. And maybe visit a few places that haven't. They traveled for nearly an hour, following the winding road that paralleled Crawford Creek. Willa recognized landmarks from her youth. The twisted lightning struck pine, the rock formation they had called Dragon's Back, the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in riotous profusion. Eventually, Owen turned the wagon onto a narrower track that climbed steadily through stands of aspen. When they emerged into a clearing, Willa gasped softly. Below them spread the Walker Ranch, but it was vastly different from the modest homestead she remembered. A large 2-story house now stood where the original cabin had been, its weathered wood and wide porch gleaming in the morning sun. Outbuildings dotted the property, a barn larger than the old one, bunkhouses, corrals where horses grazed peacefully. In the distance, cattle speckled the green pastures that stretched to the base of the mountains. You've done well, she said, genuine admiration in her voice. Had to keep busy somehow, Owen replied, a hint of wryness in his tone. Turns out hard work helps pass the time. He guided the wagon down the slope toward the ranch, pointing out improvements and additions along the way. As they approached the house, a young woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. That's Hannah, Owen explained. My sister's girl. She came to live with me after Sarah and her husband passed in that influenza outbreak 3 years back. Willa felt a pang at the news. I'm so sorry, Owen. I didn't know about Sarah. No reason you would, he said simply, bringing the wagon to a halt before the house. Hannah hurried down the steps to meet them, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. She was perhaps 16 or 17, with Sarah's blue eyes and quick smile. Uncle Owen, you didn't say we were having company, she chided good-naturedly, her curious gaze taking in Willa. Hannah, this is Miss Willa Fairchild. She's an old friend visiting from Boston. Willa, my niece Hannah. Pleased to meet you, Miss Fairchild, Hannah said with a small curtsy that seemed at odds with her practical calico dress and sturdy boots. The pleasure is mine, Willa replied, warming to the girl's open friendliness. And please call me Willa. Hannah's been keeping house for me these past years, Owen explained as he helped Willa down from the wagon. Turns out she's a far better cook than I ever was. That's not saying much, Hannah teased, taking the reins. I'll see to the horses, Uncle. You show Miss Willa around. As Hannah led the team toward the barn, Owen gestured toward the house. Would you like to see inside? The interior of the house revealed Owen's prosperity, but also his practicality. The furnishings were solid and well-made but not ostentatious. Large windows let in abundant light, and Willa was surprised to see bookshelves lining one wall of the main room. You've become a reader, she observed, running her fingers along the spines of volumes ranging from practical farming manuals to poetry collections. Had to educate myself, he said, watching her. Wanted to be able to hold my own if I ever ran into a certain schoolteacher again. Willa felt color rise to her cheeks. It's a lovely home, Owen. You should be proud. He shrugged slightly. It's bigger than I need, truth be told. Built it thinking. He trailed off, then changed course. Hannah enjoys having her own room, at least. Willa sensed the unfinished thought that he had built this house with dreams of a family, of children, of her. The realization made her heart ache in a way she hadn't allowed in years. I have something else to show you, Owen said, motioning toward the door. If you're not too tired from the ride. Outside, they walked past the barn and corrals toward a small apple orchard that hadn't been there before. Beyond it, Willa spotted a familiar outcropping of rocks overlooking the valley. Lover's Leap, she said softly, recognizing their old meeting place. You kept the name. Some things don't change, Owen replied, offering his arm as they climbed the gentle slope. At the top, Willa caught her breath. The view was just as spectacular as she remembered the ranch below them, the valley stretching toward town, and beyond that, the majestic mountains that define this land. I come up here sometimes, Owen admitted, standing beside her. To think, to remember. It's still beautiful, Willa said, feeling the past and present collide in this place that had meant so much to them both. This is where I was going to ask you to marry me, he said quietly. Had it all planned out. Summer solstice, 1875, longest day of the year. Willa turned to him, stunned. You never said. Didn't get the chance. You left in May. The weight of what might have been settled between them, as tangible as the warm breeze that rustled through the grass at their feet. I had a ring, he continued, gazing out at the horizon. Nothing fancy, just a small sapphire that reminded me of your eyes when you laugh. Kept it for years, thinking maybe someday. He shook his head, clearing away the memory. Foolish dreams of a younger man. Not foolish, Willa whispered, her voice catching. Never that. They stood in silence for a long moment, the mountains bearing witness to their unspoken regrets. Why did you really bring me here, Owen? She finally asked. He turned to face her fully, his expression open and unguarded. To show you what you left behind. Not to make you feel guilty, but because you deserved to know that what we had was real, that it mattered, that it built something lasting, even if you weren't here to see it. The honesty of his words struck her with unexpected force. For 10 years, she had convinced herself that leaving had been the right choice, the only choice. Now, standing in this place that had shaped her heart, she wasn't so sure. I need to tell you something, she said slowly, gathering her courage. The real reason I left. Owen waited, his patience another change the years had wrought in him. My father was in trouble, she began, the words painful even after all this time. He'd borrowed money from some dangerous men in Helena. When they came to collect, he couldn't pay. They threatened me. Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. Why didn't you come to me? They were watching our house. Said if he involved the law or anyone else they'd. She swallowed hard. My aunt's letter came at the same time. Father said it was the perfect solution. I could disappear, be safe in Boston, and he would deal with his problems. What happened to him? Owen asked softly. He managed to sell enough land to pay what he owed. But by then, I was established in school and he insisted I stay, make something of myself. She looked down at her hands. He died 3 years later, heart failure. Owen reached for her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. I'm sorry, Willa. I wish I'd known. I would have helped. That's why I couldn't tell you, she admitted. You would have tried to fight them, and I couldn't bear the thought of you getting hurt because of my father's mistakes. "So you sacrificed everything to protect me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I spent years thinking you'd simply found something better than a dirt-poor cowboy with big dreams." "There was never anything better," Willa whispered, the truth she'd hidden even from herself finally breaking free. Their eyes met, a decade of misunderstanding dissolving in the clear mountain air. Owen's hand tightened on hers, and for a moment she thought he might pull her into his arms. Instead, he released her and stepped back slightly. "It's getting late," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Hannah will have lunch waiting." The moment had passed, but something had shifted between them. A door reopened that neither had expected to find unlocked. As they made their way back to the ranch house, Willa felt lighter than she had in years, as if sharing her secret had released a burden she'd carried for too long. Yet new questions now pressed upon her what this revelation meant for her carefully constructed life, for the future she had planned without him. Hannah had indeed prepared a generous midday meal, and the three of them ate on the wide front porch, the conversation flowing more easily than Willa would have imagined. Hannah was bright and curious, asking thoughtful questions about Boston and Willa's teaching. "It sounds wonderful," the girl said wistfully as Willa described her students. "I've always wanted to continue my education, but there's not much opportunity out here." "Hannah's smart as a whip," Owen interjected proudly. "Been teaching herself from those books in there. Knows more about literature than half the so-called educated men in these parts." Willa saw the blush of pleasure on Hannah's face at her uncle's praise. "Have you considered sending her east for schooling?" she asked Owen. "There are several excellent academies for young women that might offer scholarships." "We've talked about it," Owen admitted, "but it's a long way to send a young girl alone." "I wouldn't be alone forever," Hannah pointed out. "I'd come back." The exchange stirred something in Willa, the realization that she could help this bright young woman in a way Mrs. Patterson had once helped her. "I could make inquiries when I return," she offered. "Perhaps write some recommendations." Hannah's eyes lit up. "Would you really?" "Of course," Willa smiled. "Education opened doors for me that I never imagined possible. It should be available to any young woman with the desire to learn." Owen watched this exchange with an expression Willa couldn't quite decipher. "That's mighty kind of you," he said finally. After lunch, Hannah excused herself to tend to her chores, leaving Owen and Willa alone on the porch. The afternoon stretched before them, golden and uncertain. "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch?" Owen asked. "I could saddle a couple of horses." The prospect of riding again, of feeling the freedom of horseback in this country she had once loved, was too tempting to refuse. "I'd like that very much." Soon they were mounted, Willa on a gentle bay mare, Owen on his rangy buckskin gelding and heading toward the western pastures. Willa's body remembered the rhythm of riding as if she had never left, and she found herself laughing with the sheer joy of it as they cantered across an open meadow. "There she is," Owen called, drawing alongside her. "The Willa Fairchild I remember." They slowed to a walk as they approached a small stream, dismounting to let the horses drink. The afternoon sun was warm on Willa's face as she watched a hawk circling lazily overhead. "I've missed this," she admitted. "The openness, the quiet, the sense that you can see forever." "It gets in your blood," Owen agreed, leaning against a sun-warmed boulder. "This land, I mean, becomes part of you." "Yes," she said softly. "I've felt its absence, even surrounded by all that Boston offers." "Why did you stay away so long?" he asked. "After your father died, after the danger had passed?" Willa considered the question. "At first it was shame, I suppose, for leaving the way I did, for not writing the truth. Then it was easier to just keep moving forward, to believe that chapter of my life was closed. And now—" She met his gaze. "Now I'm not sure what to believe anymore." Owen pushed away from the boulder, moving closer to her. "What about your life in Boston? Is there someone?" He left the question hanging. "No," she answered truthfully. "There have been suitors, but no one." She hesitated. "No one who made me feel the way you did." The admission hung between them, unexpected and fragile. "And you," she asked, suddenly needing to know. Has there been anyone for you? Owen looked out across the land he had built into something substantial. Came close once, about 4 years back. Daughter of a cattle buyer from Wyoming, nice woman, would have made a good partner. He shrugged slightly. But it didn't feel right. Wouldn't have been fair to her, living with a ghost. The implications of his words settled around them like the lengthening shadows of late afternoon. We should head back, Owen said finally. It's a fair ride to town, and I don't want you traveling after dark. The return journey was made mostly in silence, each lost in thoughts of what had been revealed and what remained unspoken. As they crested the final hill before the ranch house came into view, Owen reined his horse to a stop. Willa, he said, his voice serious. I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. She nodded, her heart suddenly racing. If things had been different, if you'd never had to leave, or if you'd been able to tell me the truth, what would you have said? That summer solstice, if I had asked, the question stripped away the years and pretenses, demanding nothing less than complete honesty. I would have said yes, she answered, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it, without hesitation. Something shifted in Owen's expression, a certainty replacing the careful reserve he had maintained. One more night, he said. Stay one more night, not at the hotel, here at the ranch. Hannah would welcome the company, and we have plenty of room. The invitation was innocent enough, yet Willa understood the significance of it. He was asking for time, for a chance to find their way back to each other, or perhaps forward to something new. My things are at the hotel, she said, not quite a refusal. We can send Hannah to fetch them, or ride into town together after supper. Decision hung in the balance as the sun dipped lower in the western sky. To stay would be to acknowledge the possibility that had opened between them. To leave would be to close it again, perhaps forever. One more night, she agreed finally. Relief washed across Owen's features, followed by a smile that reminded her of the boy she had loved so fiercely. Race you back, he challenged, suddenly lighthearted, and spurred his horse forward before she could respond. Laughing, Willa urged her mare after him, the wind in her hair and the sense of possibility expanding within her like the vast Montana sky above. Dusk was settling as they returned to the ranch, Hannah coming out to greet them with evident surprise at Willa's continued presence. Miss Fairchild will be staying the night, Owen explained as they dismounted. Would you mind getting the east bedroom ready? Hannah's eyes darted between them, a small smile playing at her lips. Of course, and should I prepare something special for supper? Whatever you've planned is fine, Owen assured her, but we should send someone to collect Willa's things from the hotel. I can ride in with Liam when he returns from checking the north fence, Hannah offered. He should be back shortly. As Hannah bustled away to make preparations, Owen led Willa toward the house. The east bedroom was my mother's, he explained. It's the nicest one in the house. I'm sure it will be perfect, Willa said, suddenly aware of the domesticity of the moment returning home together at day's end, making arrangements for the evening ahead. Inside, Owen showed her to a small sitting room where a fire had been laid against the evening chill. Make yourself comfortable. I need to check with the hands about tomorrow's work, but I won't be long. Left alone, Willa wandered the room, examining the small touches that made this house a home, framed photographs of what must be Owen's family. A quilt draped over a rocking chair, a vase of wildflowers on the side table. She paused before the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines until one in particular caught her eye, a collection of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnets. Well-worn and obviously read often. She was still holding the book when Owen returned, having shed his riding coat and hat. Find something interesting, he asked, noticing the volume in her hands. I wouldn't have taken you for a poetry man, she said, smiling. There's a lot you don't know about me now, he replied, but there was no bitterness in his tone. 10 years is a long time. Yes, she agreed softly. It is. He moved closer, taking the book gently from her hands. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways, he quoted, his voice low. Always liked that one. I didn't realize cowboys had such romantic souls, she teased, though her heart quickened at his nearness. Only certain cowboys, he answered, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. The ones who have had reason to contemplate matters of the heart. Their eyes met and held, the moment stretching between them with unspoken possibilities. Then Hannah's voice called from the kitchen, breaking the spell. "Supper's nearly ready." Owen stepped back slightly. "We should wash up. There's a washroom just down the hall." Dinner was a pleasant affair, with Hannah proving to be an excellent cook. The young woman had changed into a fresh dress for the meal, and her obvious desire to make a good impression touched Willa deeply. "This is delicious," Willa complimented as she tasted the venison stew. "You have quite a talent in the kitchen, Hannah." "Uncle Owen shot the deer," Hannah explained. "He's the best hunter in the county." "Hannah gives me too much credit," Owen demurred, "but I do enjoy providing for the table." The conversation flowed easily as they ate, touching on ranch matters, local news, and Hannah's hopes for further education. When they had finished, Hannah rose to clear the dishes. "I'll help," Willa offered, standing as well. "No need," the girl insisted. "You're our guest. Besides, Liam will be here soon to take me into town for your things." As if summoned by her words, they heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching, and moments later a knock at the door announced the arrival of the young ranch hand. "That's our cue," Hannah said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll be back before you know it with your valise, Miss Fairchild." After they had departed, a comfortable silence settled over the dining room. Owen poured 2 glasses of brandy from a decanter on the sideboard and offered one to Willa. "To old friends," he proposed, raising his glass. "And new beginnings," she added, surprising herself with the words. They sipped the amber liquid, its warmth spreading through Willa's chest. Outside, twilight had deepened into night, and through the windows, she could see stars beginning to emerge in the vast Montana sky. "Would you like to sit on the porch?" Owen suggested. "The night's mild, and the view of the stars is better than any painting." They settled onto a wooden swing that hung from the porch ceiling, their shoulders not quite touching. The night air was indeed gentle, scented with pine and the lingering warmth of sun-baked earth. Above them, the Milky Way arched in a brilliant swath across the darkness. "I'd forgotten how bright the stars are here," Willa murmured, tipping her head back to take in the celestial display. "In Boston, the city lights dim them considerably." "Some things don't change," Owen said, his voice quiet in the darkness. "The stars, the mountains, the way this land makes you feel small and significant all at once." They swung gently, the creaking of the chains a rhythmic counterpoint to the night sounds of the ranch distant lowing of cattle, the soft nickering of horses in the barn, the whisper of wind through the pines. "I've thought about you," Owen admitted after a time. "Wondered if you found what you were looking for in the East." Willa considered the question seriously. "I found purpose," she said finally, "independence, the satisfaction of helping young women discover their own potential." She paused. "But there were other things I left behind that couldn't be replaced." "Such as?" She turned slightly to look at him, his profile strong against the starlit sky. "Freedom, space to breathe, the sense of possibility that comes with watching the sun rise over mountains that have stood for millennia." "And people?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes," she whispered. "People too." Owen's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining with a familiarity that belied the years apart. "I never stopped loving you, Willa, tried to. God knows I tried. But some feelings get buried and never truly die." The echo of his words from the cemetery sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the night air. "When I saw you standing at Martha's grave," he continued, "it was like time collapsed, 10 years gone in an instant." "I felt it too," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "The moment I heard your spurs behind me." Owen's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "What happens now, Willa? You go back to Boston tomorrow, and we wait another 10 years to cross paths at someone else's funeral." The question hung between them, laden with all they had lost and might yet find again. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "My life is there now. My work, my students. And your heart." The directness of his question demanded equal honesty. "My heart has never fully left Montana," she confessed. "Or you." Owen turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. "Then stay," he said simply. "Not forever if you're not ready for that, but longer than tomorrow. Long enough for us to discover if what we feel is memory or something more enduring." Willa leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. "It would be complicated." "Life usually is," he replied with a slight smile. "Doesn't mean it's not worth figuring out." Before she could respond, the sound of wagon wheels announced Hannah's return. Owen withdrew his hand reluctantly as the wagon came into view, though their fingers remained intertwined on the swing between them. "Perfect timing," Willa murmured with a small smile. "To be continued," Owen promised, squeezing her hand once before standing to greet his niece. Later, settled in the beautifully appointed east bedroom with her valise unpacked, Willa stood at the window gazing out at the starlit landscape. The decision before her seemed both momentous and simple: to return to the life she had built, or to stay and explore the possibility that her first love might also be her last. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Hannah with an offer of fresh towels or water. Instead, Owen stood in the doorway, hesitating at the threshold of her temporary domain. "I wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said. "The room is lovely," she assured him. "Your mother had excellent taste. She would have liked you," he said, remaining in the doorway as if uncertain of his welcome. "Strong-minded women always appealed to her." Willa smiled at that. "I wish I could have known her better." "She knew how I felt about you," Owen admitted. "Told me once that true love doesn't come along often, and when it does, a person ought to fight for it." The words hung in the air between them, a challenge and an invitation. "Wise woman," Willa said softly. Owen nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been thinking about what you said about your life in Boston, your students, your work." "Yes, I respect that, Willa. What you've built for yourself, what you've accomplished, I wouldn't ask you to give that up." She moved closer to him, drawn by the sincerity in his voice. "What would you ask?" "For a chance," he said simply. "Time to see if there's a way forward for us that honors who we've become, not just who we were. And if there isn't, then we'll have closure at least, something better than 10 years of wondering what might have been." Willa considered his words, the reasonableness of them, the hope underlying them. "The school term ends in 6 weeks," she said finally. "I have commitments until then that I can't in good conscience abandon." Owen's expression brightened with cautious hope. "And after?" "After," she said slowly, making the decision even as she spoke it. "I could return. For the summer at least. To see if what we feel can bridge the years between then and now." The smile that spread across Owen's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then brilliant with promise. "I'd like that very much," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So would I," she whispered. He stepped forward then, closing the distance between them. His hand came up to gently touch her cheek, his eyes searching hers for permission. Willa leaned into his touch, her own hand rising to cover his. "I should go," he murmured, though he made no move to leave. "It's late, and you must be tired from the day's riding." "Stay," she said softly. "Just a little longer." His other arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "Willa," he breathed, her name a prayer and a plea. When his lips found hers, it was both familiar and entirely new: the taste of him, the strength of his embrace, the tenderness in his touch. 10 years fell away as they rediscovered each other in the quiet of the moonlit room. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers, his breathing uneven. "I should definitely go now," he said, a smile in his voice, "before I forget every good intention I've ever had." Willa laughed softly, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "A gentleman to the end." "Hardly that," he admitted, pressing a final kiss to her forehead. Just a man who wants to do right by the woman he loves. The word hung between them, acknowledged at last. "Good night, Owen," she said, stepping back though her hands lingered on his arms. "Dream of me," he replied with the boyish smile she remembered so well. "I always have," she answered truthfully. After he had gone, Willa changed into her nightgown and sat at the dressing table, unbraiding her hair. The face that looked back at her from the mirror seemed transformed younger somehow, her eyes bright, her cheeks flushed with more than just the lingering warmth of his kiss. For the first time in a decade, she allowed herself to imagine a different future than the one she had planned, one that included wide open spaces, star-filled nights, and the love of a man who had never forgotten her. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the curtains and the aroma of coffee drifting up from the kitchen below. Willa dressed quickly in a simple day dress, pinning her hair in a looser style than her usual Boston severity. Downstairs, she found Hannah alone at the stove, turning bacon in a cast iron skillet. "Good morning," the girl greeted cheerfully. "Uncle Owen's already been out checking the herd, said to tell you he'd be back for breakfast. Can I help with anything?" Willa offered, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the pot warming on the stove. "You could set the table if you like," Hannah suggested. "Plates are in that cupboard." As they worked companionably, Willa found herself curious about this young woman who had become so important in Owen's life. "How do you like living here, Hannah? It must have been a difficult adjustment after losing your parents." Hannah nodded, her expression momentarily somber. "It was hard at first. I miss them terribly, still do, but Uncle Owen has been wonderful. Patient when I was grieving, firm when I needed direction. He seems to have a natural talent for caring for others." "He does," Hannah agreed, transferring the bacon to a plate. "Though he needed someone to care for him too, I think. He was so alone before I came." She hesitated, then added, "He never said much about it, but Mrs. Patterson told me once that he'd had his heart broken badly when he was younger." Willa focused intently on arranging forks beside the plates, guilt and tenderness warring within her. "People can surprise us with their resilience," she said finally. Hannah began cracking eggs into the hot bacon fat. "That's true, and sometimes life gives second chances when you least expect them." Before Willa could respond to this pointed observation, the back door opened, and Owen entered, bringing with him the scent of morning air and horsehide. He'd clearly taken time to wash up, his hair damp at the temples, his shirt fresh. "Ladies," he greeted, his eyes finding Willa's with a warmth that sent color to her cheeks. "Something smells wonderful." "Just in time," Hannah announced, sliding eggs onto plates. "Sit down before it gets cold." Breakfast was a cheerful affair, with Owen recounting an amusing incident involving a new foal and an indignant mother mare. Willa found herself laughing freely, caught up in the easy domesticity of the scene. "What would you like to do today?" Owen asked her as they finished their coffee. "The stage doesn't leave until tomorrow morning." The reminder of her impending departure sobered her momentarily. "I'd like to see more of the ranch, if that's possible, and perhaps visit Mrs. Patterson's grave once more before I go." Owen nodded, understanding. "We can do both." "I need to ride out to check the east pasture anyway. You could come along, and we can stop by the cemetery on our way back." "I'd like that," Willa agreed. Hannah began gathering the dishes. "And I'll have a special dinner waiting when you return. If you're to leave tomorrow, we should make your last night memorable." The day unfolded like a gift, each hour bringing Willa closer to the realization that what she felt for Owen was no mere echo of youthful passion, but something deeper and more enduring. As they rode side by side across the rolling grasslands, she found herself storing away images like treasures, the way sunlight caught in his hair, the easy grace with which he handled his horse, the respect evident in his interactions with the ranch hands they encountered. In turn, Owen seemed to delight in showing her the world he had built, pointing out improvements with quiet pride and sharing plans for the future. They stopped for lunch by a small lake, spreading a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree. I used to dream about bringing you here, Owen admitted as they watched a family of ducks glide across the water's surface. When I first found this spot. It's beautiful, Willa said, leaning back on her elbows to take in the pastoral scene. Peaceful. That's what I thought. Good place for picnics, I figured. Maybe teaching little ones to fish someday. He glanced at her, a hint of vulnerability in his expression. Had it all planned out back then? The mention of children brought a familiar ache to Willa's heart. I've often wondered what it would be like, she admitted. Having a family of my own. My students fill that void somewhat, but it's not quite the same. You'd be a wonderful mother, Owen said with conviction, and you're already proving to be an excellent guardian to Hannah, she replied. She clearly adores you. She makes it easy. Smart as they come and kind too, reminds me of you sometimes. Willa smiled at that. I'm honored by the comparison. As the afternoon waned, they made their way to the cemetery on the outskirts of town. The place was deserted, the recent funeral forgotten by all but those who had truly loved the departed teacher. Owen hung back respectfully as Willa approached Martha Patterson's grave. The wooden marker seemed starker in the bright afternoon light than it had in the golden hour of their previous visit. Willa knelt beside it, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers they had gathered along the way. Thank you, she whispered to the woman who had changed the course of her life with encouragement and faith. For everything. When she rose and turned back toward Owen, she found him watching her with an expression of such tenderness that it nearly undid her composure. She would be proud of you, he said simply. I hope so, Willa replied, taking his offered arm as they walked back toward their horses. She believed education could transform lives. Mine certainly was. Do you ever regret it? Owen asked carefully. Leaving. Willa considered the question seriously. I regret the way I left, she answered finally. The hurt it caused, the years we lost. But I don't regret becoming the person I am now, and I'm not sure that would have happened if I'd stayed. Owen nodded slowly. I understand that. I'm not the same man I was at 18 either. No, she agreed, studying his face in the late afternoon light. You're better. His smile was worth the admission, worth every mile she had traveled to find herself here again. They returned to the ranch, as sunset painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Hannah had been true to her word, preparing a feast that would have done a fine restaurant proud. You've outdone yourself, Owen declared as they sat down to a table laden with roast chicken, fresh vegetables from the kitchen garden, and warm bread that filled the house with its homey aroma. Nothing but the best for our guest, Hannah replied with a smile for Willa. As they ate, conversation turned to plans Willa's return to Boston, the letters that would bridge the 6 weeks until summer, Hannah's possible schooling in the East. Perhaps you could even visit some of the schools with Miss Fairchild when you return, Hannah suggested to Willa, her expression hopeful. I'd be happy to show you around, Willa agreed, touched by the girl's assumption that she would indeed come back to Montana. Boston has much to offer a young woman interested in education. And then you'll both return for the summer, Owen added, his eyes meeting Willa's across the table. If that's still your intention, it is, she confirmed, her decision crystallizing into certainty. The summer and perhaps beyond. The implications of her words were not lost on either Owen or Hannah, whose face broke into a delighted smile. I knew it, the girl exclaimed. I told Liam you were the mystery lady from Uncle Owen's past, but he wouldn't believe me. Hannah, Owen admonished, though there was no real reproach in his tone. Well, it's true, Hannah defended herself. You've kept her picture all these years, the one in your desk drawer that you think I don't know about. Willa raised an eyebrow at Owen, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. A picture? From the county fair, summer of '74, he admitted. You were wearing a blue dress, laughing at something I'd said. The memory surfaced like a treasure brought to light the traveling photographer, Owen insisting on paying for the tintype, her protest that she looked a fright after an afternoon in the sun. I can't believe you kept it all this time, she said softly. Like I told you at the cemetery, he replied, his voice low. Some feelings get buried but never truly die. The evening continued with coffee on the porch, watching as stars appeared one by one in the deepening blue of the Montana sky. Hannah excused herself early, claiming fatigue but giving Willa a significant glance as she departed that made it clear she was offering them privacy. Your niece is not particularly subtle, Willa observed with amusement once they were alone. Owen chuckled, settling beside her on the porch swing. Subtlety is not among Hannah's many virtues. They swayed gently in comfortable silence for a time, the night wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. Willa found herself reluctant to acknowledge that this might be their last evening together for weeks. I'll write to you, Owen promised, seeming to read her thoughts. Every week until you return. And I'll count the days, she replied, allowing her head to rest against his shoulder. His arm came around her, drawing her closer. 6 weeks isn't so very long, he mused. Not compared to 10 years. No, she agreed, though I suspect it will feel longer. We have tonight, he reminded her, his voice a gentle rumble against her ear. Willa lifted her head to look at him, finding his gaze already on her, warm and intent in the starlight. Yes, she whispered. We have tonight. When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that spoke of patience and promise. His hand cradled the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair that had come loose from its pins. Willa melted into him, allowing herself to imagine a future where such moments were commonplace rather than precious rarities. Marry me, Owen murmured against her lips, the words so soft she might have imagined them. Willa drew back slightly, searching his face. What did you say? His expression was open, vulnerable yet certain. Marry me, Willa, not tonight, not tomorrow, but when you return in the summer, if you still feel as you do now, marry me and make this place your home again. The proposal hung between them, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. This isn't just because I'm leaving tomorrow, she asked, needing to be sure. Not a desperate attempt to keep me here. I've wanted to ask you that question since I was 20 years old, he answered solemnly. The timing may be impulsive, but the intention never has been. Willa considered his words, the truth of them evident in his steady gaze. I need to fulfill my obligations in Boston, she said slowly, to my students, to the school that has been my home these past years. I understand that, he assured her. And I'd never ask you to abandon your responsibilities. But after, she continued, her decision solidifying even as she spoke it, when the term is finished and my affairs are in order. Yes, Owen Walker, I will marry you. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then brilliant with promise. He gathered her close, his embrace conveying what words could not: gratitude, relief, and love that had endured despite time and distance. I'll build you a library, he promised against her hair. Fill it with books for you to teach from, and I'll listen when you talk of ideas and poetry and all the things that matter to you. And I'll learn to bake bread again, she said, smiling through tears that had appeared without warning. And ride every day and help Hannah with her studies. We'll make a good life, Owen said with quiet confidence. Different from what we imagined at 18, but better perhaps because we'll appreciate it more. Yes, Willa agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. Better for having known what it is to lose each other and find our way back again. The night deepened around them, stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. On the porch of the house he had built with her in mind, Owen held Willa close, marveling at the twists of fate that had brought her back to him. I should go in, she said finally, though she made no move to leave the circle of his arms. It's late, and the stage leaves early. Just a little longer, he murmured, echoing her words from the night before. Dawn will come soon enough. And so they remained, planning their future in quiet voices as the Montana night embraced them like old friends coming home at last. The morning of Willa's departure dawned clear and bright, the eastern sky painted in shades of rose and gold that promised a beautiful day for traveling. She had packed her valise the night before, leaving out only what she would need for the journey back to Boston. As she dressed in her traveling suit, Willa found herself already counting the days until her return. 6 weeks suddenly seemed an eternity when measured against the happiness she had rediscovered in Owen's arms. Downstairs, she found both Owen and Hannah already at the breakfast table, though neither appeared to have much appetite. The mood was subdued, the impending separation hanging over them like a cloud. "I've packed some food for your journey," Hannah said, gesturing to a basket on the counter. "Bread and cheese, and some of that apple cake you liked yesterday." "That's very thoughtful," Willa said, touched by the girl's consideration. "Thank you, Hannah. And I have something for you too," Owen added, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Nothing fancy, but I thought you might want it while we're apart." Willa unwrapped the parcel carefully, finding inside the worn volume of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnets she had noticed on his bookshelf. "Owen, I can't take this. It's yours." "I know the important ones by heart," he said with a small smile. "Besides, this way you'll have to bring it back to me." The gesture nearly undid her composure. "I'll treasure it," she promised, running her fingers over the embossed cover. The ride to town was quiet, each of them lost in thoughts of the weeks ahead. Hannah had insisted on coming along, sitting between them on the wagon seat, her presence a gentle reminder of the family they might become. The stagecoach was already waiting when they arrived, the driver loading luggage and mail while passengers said their goodbyes. Willa felt a sudden reluctance to leave, a physical ache at the thought of being separated from Owen now that they had found each other again. 6 weeks, Owen reminded her as he helped her down from the wagon. "It will pass before you know it." "I'll write as soon as I arrive," she promised. Hannah stepped forward to embrace her, the girl's affection evident in the tightness of her hug. "Safe travels, Miss Fairchild." "I'll look forward to your letters about the schools." "You'll be the first to know what I discover," Willa assured her, returning the embrace warmly. Then it was just the two of them, standing close but not touching, aware of the public nature of their farewell. "I love you," Owen said simply, his voice low and meant for her alone. "I've loved you since we were hardly more than children, and I'll love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Willa replied, her heart full to bursting with the truth of it. "Always have, even when I pretended not to." He took her hand then, propriety be damned, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Come back to me." "I will," she vowed. "Nothing could keep me away." The driver called for passengers to board, breaking the moment. With one last look at Owen's beloved face, Willa climbed into the stage, settling by the window where she could see him until the last possible moment. As the coach lurched into motion, she pressed her hand to the glass, watching as Owen raised his in response, a silent promise between them that transcended distance and time. The journey east was long, but gave Willa ample opportunity to plan. By the time she reached Boston, she had composed letters of resignation to her school's headmistress, inquiries to potential replacements for her position, and detailed lists of what she would bring west and what she would leave behind. The 6 weeks passed in a flurry of activity tying up loose ends, recommending Hannah to several prestigious academies, and preparing her students for the transition to a new teacher. Through it all, Owen's letters sustained her, each one a testament to the love that had weathered separation before and would endure this briefer parting. In his last letter before her departure, he wrote, "The house stands ready for your return. I've added bookshelves to the sitting room and filled the vase on your dresser with fresh wildflowers every day, as if you might appear at any moment to enjoy them." Hannah has been baking incessantly, determined to master every recipe she thinks you might enjoy. As for me, I find myself watching the road each afternoon, knowing it's too soon but unable to keep my eyes from searching the horizon for the first glimpse of you. My heart has lived in 2 places these past weeks, here on the land that is my blood and bone, and there with you, where my future waits to begin. Come home, Willa. Come home to Montana, to the ranch, to me. I'll be waiting at the station when the stage arrives, just as I've been waiting these 10 years for you to find your way back to where you belong." On the day of her departure from Boston, Willa stood in her small apartment one last time, taking in the space that had been her sanctuary for nearly a decade. The shelves were empty now, her books packed and shipped ahead. The furniture would remain for her replacement, another young teacher eager to make her mark. She felt no regret as she closed the door behind her, only a sense of rightness, of moving toward rather than away from her destiny. The westward journey seemed to pass more quickly than its eastern counterpart, each mile bringing her closer to the life she had chosen, to the man who had waited so patiently for her return. When the stagecoach finally rolled into Rattlesnake Creek on a golden June afternoon, Willa's heart pounded with anticipation. She peered eagerly through the window, searching for the familiar tall figure among those waiting at the station. And there he was, standing apart from the crowd, his hat in his hands, his eyes fixed on the approaching coach. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his stance, the barely contained emotion in his expression. The stage had barely stopped when Willa flung open the door, not waiting for the driver's assistance. Owen moved forward at the same moment, and they met halfway, heedless of the curious onlookers. "You're here," he said, his voice rough with feeling as his hands came up to frame her face. "You're really here. I told you I'd come back," she replied, smiling through tears of joy. "Nothing could have kept me away." When he kissed her, right there in the dusty street with half the town as witness, Willa knew with absolute certainty that she was home at last. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Hannah as maid of honor and the neighboring ranchers and their families in attendance. Martha Patterson would have approved, Willa thought, of the education fund they established in her name, designed to help promising young women from the territory pursue higher learning. Life settled into a rhythm that suited them, both mornings spent working alongside each other. Owen managing the ranch, while Willa established a small school for the children of ranch hands and nearby homesteaders. Afternoons often found them riding together across the vast Montana landscape, reacquainting themselves with the land and each other. Evenings were for reading aloud by the fire, planning for the future, and rediscovering the passion that had never truly died. Hannah departed for school in Boston that autumn, promising to return for holidays and summers. Her letters arrived regularly, full of excitement about her studies and grateful acknowledgments of Willa's guidance in navigating her new world. As winter settled over the ranch, blanketing the land in pristine white, Willa stood at the window of their bedroom, watching as Owen returned from checking the cattle in the lower pasture. Snow dusted his shoulders and hat, but his smile when he spotted her at the window was as warm as summer sunshine. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, the winter wind howling outside their snug home, Willa traced the lines of his face with gentle fingers. "Any regrets?" Owen asked, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not one," she assured him, nestling closer to his warmth. "Every path I've taken, even those that led away from you, brought me back here in the end, back where I belong." "Love was buried," he murmured, echoing the words he had spoken to her that day in the cemetery, "but it never died. And now it's found new life," Willa added, guiding his hand to rest on her abdomen, still flat but harboring their secret. "In more ways than one." Owen's eyes widened with wonder as her meaning registered. "Truly," he whispered, his voice catching. "Truly," she confirmed, joy bubbling through her like a mountain spring. "Come summer, there will be 3 of us to greet Hannah when she returns." His whoop of delight echoed through the house as he gathered her close, his happiness as boundless as the Montana sky. And as snow continued to fall outside their window, blanketing the land in silent beauty, Willa Fairchild Walker gave thanks for second chances, for love that endured across time and distance, and for the journey that had finally led her home.